right, so our next project is also a really exciting project. It's with our partners at Bloomberg Associates and the MBK Alliance. So we have Niiobli Armah from Bloomberg Associates here with Ayanna Seals, who worked on this project. So I'm going to go here first, and then I'll...
Down. Good morning, everyone. So at Bloomberg Associates, our job is to help build the capacity of cities around the world to actually do projects that otherwise they couldn't do by themselves. I work on the social service team. For the past few years, we've actually been working on the Equity Intelligence Platform, which is a partnership with the My Brother's Keeper Alliance. So raise your hand if you're familiar with President Obama's My Brother's Keeper initiative. Oh, awesome. Okay. And so for those of you who are not, it's laser focused on decreasing racial disparities for boys and young men of color across the country. And one of the things that Bloomberg asked itself when we entered this space is there are a ton of organizations focused on narrative change and build a capacity at the grassroots level, and all great things. But we asked ourselves, like, what could Bloomberg do in this space? And naturally, it had to do something with data. And so we've actually been working in Houston. We started in Oakland. We've been working in Houston really to figure out at the municipal level, how do you get government agencies to talk to each other and share data? Because believe it or not, it actually does not happen. What does happen in cities is that all the people in education and school discipline reform, they go to meetings and talk about everything that needs to change. The public health people go to all their meetings and talk about everything that needs to change, et cetera. And for us, if we're really going to move the needle on racial disparities, one of the most important things that needs to happen across the country is understanding what happens to young people across multiple systems. And so we know that families aren't unemployed on Monday, dealing with someone who's in criminal justice system on Tuesday, and then experiencing food deserts on Wednesday. All these things happen at the same time, but our data systems haven't started to integrate so that we can understand the unique experience of people as they go through these systems. And so the Equity Intelligence Platform is a tool to bring data alive to do just that. And these are some of the questions that we've been thinking about. I would say the one that gets the most attention is the correlation between school discipline and youth entering the justice system. And so, does the school system share the information with the Juvenile Probation Board? Because we all know that the pathway into the criminal justice system is the first time a student gets suspended because they won't sit in their seat. We know further down the line as we go, the more engagement that you have with school discipline reform, it leads to engagement with the criminal justice system, which is why this project has been so important. In terms of stakeholders, and so when we started this project, I would say one of the things we learned is we went straight to the policymakers. We went to the mayor's office because that's who we talked to. We went to the county judges. What we realized is that these systems are fragmented in the sense that county and city government aren't always best friends for those of you who have worked in government. And so when you present a project like this to folks, if you go to the mayor first, and then without going to the county, at the very beginning, you're creating issues for yourself just because of how government is structured on the ground. What we also found out is that Bloomberg Associates is laser focused on cities. But if you work in the social services, you know social services are at the county level. Cities actually don't, there's very few cities that have health departments or social service agencies. And so at the very beginning, we had to understand who our stakeholders were. And just as important as it is to talk to the mayor, it's that important to engage parents. And so that they understand the ethical use of their data. But even beyond parents, we found out we have to engage the activists because of this growing understanding across the country of what happens when data is used in a bad way. And so this actually built our capacity as an organization, not just to talk to people in City Hall, but how do we get in community and talk to voters and organizers so that we're building capacity so that the community can move together. Because what we know is that when this project is done, we just don't want the person in City Hall using it. We want the activists to use it. We want everyone that goes to those collective impact meetings every single month, we want them to be using it. And so we have to engage people all along the way so that when it's done, uptake is at its highest level. And then just before I pass it on to Ayanna, who we were so glad was with us this summer, is that what is the EIP actually going to do? And so some of the things that's wrong with city government data is usually if you work in social services or particularly in racial disparity work, usually what you get is a report once a year, the annual report for the state of young people. But by the time you read the report, it's too late to intervene on anything that you read in the report because populations are always changing. Young people are always moving. Systems are always evolving. And so for us, one of the important features of this is that it's real time. So we know attendance is taken every single day in this country. So why do we have to wait once a year to figure out what the chronic absenteeism trends are? We should know as soon as it's possible what's happening. Why are young people in this part of the city not getting to school on time? And then how do we drive resources to it? And so real time is really important. This whole concept of like identifying root causes. If I go back to the school discipline reform, if we know what's happening in the social services and neighborhood, there's actually a story from Houston. I'll make it real quick. We are in one school district doing our focus groups about this project, and a teacher told us a story that we've actually not been able to get out of our heads. And it was a young kid who was constantly like getting suspended and just was just not, it just wasn't working. This is at an elementary school. He was a fourth grader. And what the parents found out, or what the school district found out, is that the kids were picking on him because he smelled. He had like a stench on him. And everyone kept trying to figure out, like, well, what's going on? Finally, someone in the MBK program, who's a social service worker at Harris County, did a home visit and realized that that young man, the water had been cut off for months. And so he didn't have a way to wash his clothes. And so because he didn't wash his clothes, the kids were picking on him and he was getting in trouble, et cetera, et cetera. So the point of that is that no one understood that it was something so simple. And the idea of EIP is not for us to figure out that this young man needed a washer and dryer in his house. Actually, the school district did intervene and he was able to start washing his clothes at schools. But the point is, we need something that allows us to use data to see what is the root cause. Like, what is the narrative behind the numbers? We get so excited about trends and patterns, and we don't ask ourselves the qualitative questions about the data. And EIP, because it has this racial equity lens for young men and boys of color, by premise, we're asking those questions as from the very beginning. And then the last thing that we hope eventually EIP does is actually get us to the point where we can actually measure impact. And so if there is going to be an intervention around understanding what's happening with kids at home, what's going to be the impact down the line. And so I'm excited that Ayanna was here with us this summer, and I invite her to help unpack EIP some more.
Thank you. All right, so we're addressing these issues with the EIP by creating access for communities to a national database that will kind of merge together data from different sources. If you think about like health, education, criminal justice, pulling those all into one database and allowing or providing access to visualizations, analytics tools to allow communities to kind of track the benchmarks of the indicators, success indicators that are provided by or outlined by My Brother's Keeper Alliance Network. And so there's a major concern with doing something like this, which is data privacy. So we're trying to take very much care on how we're handling this data, what's anonymous and what's anonymous. And so the system for that currently is, the process starts with collaborating with government institutions, and they're all separate, they're all providing different data sources, and we take that data and connect it all based off of an indicator or an identifier that is constant between all of the sources. And then once that is done, we look at all of the potential individual identifiers and remove them. So things such as name, address, social security number, and go through and make sure that when you look at a single data point on this master sheet, you can't really tell who that individual is. So that's a very important thing to take care of. And so once all of that is done, it is moved to the national database, and from that, we pull the information for the web platform. Cool. So on the platform itself, users will be able to select a success indicator. So in this example, it's parental incarceration rate. Then they can select from other indicators potential impacting factors. So in this example, they are just looking at that's parental incarceration rate based off of the filters, location, school, race, age, and gender, but not filtering any of that at all, just letting all of the data stay there. And all of the data that will be in this system is time-based. So in this case scenario, it's looking across from 2013 to 2017. And I just want to note real quick that these mock-ups are just examples. They're not based off of real data right now, it's just mock data. But we just wanted to give an idea of the layout of this platform. So to kind of avoid information overload, the graphs would be generated based off of the data type that's selected by the user. Just to show a couple more examples, here's an example of looking at the incarceration rate compared to the third grade reading level. And in this scenario, the user selected just 1 year. On the other side, they selected a range of years. So it's just kind of showing the different ways that you can kind of look at data. And for the challenges, would you like to come back up?
Yeah, we'll just, before we go into questions, we'll just talk a little about the challenges of this work. We've been working on this project for over 2 years. Last year we were here, I don't know if anyone was here, and gave an update. Things have gotten better. And so, the challenges are really just legal and trust issues. And so the first question is, like, how is this legally permissible? And when you're in a municipality talking about data use, agencies are very used to specific use cases. Even actually the law, that's what it calls for. But one of the things we've been trying to get folks to understand is that we actually can't tell you specific use cases because we've never actually talked about combining data together. We don't know what, we know the frame for what it can do, but because this has never happened, how do we address for that? And so what we've done in Houston, because of the technology infrastructure that we worked with, the only thing that folks are gonna see publicly that's going to be available is the visualizations. So what this project is not going to do is integrated case management, because some people are doing that in the country. I mean, Erin Dalton and her team in Allegheny County, it's been done in New York City, but integrated case management is actually where it's more difficult legally. For what we're trying to do, because it's going to be publicly available and only visualizations, we've been actually to get lawyers across the finish line. The 4 data source agencies for this project is Alief Independent School District, it's the City of Houston, it's Harris County, and then it's the Mental Health Agency, which is adjacent to Harris County, and then each of those data source agencies have departments that have come to the table. The school district actually was the first partner, surprisingly for us, to actually sign the business associates agreement. One of the things that we have spent the most time on this project is not the technology and not the outreach and community engagement. It's actually been the legal documents that people signed to participate in this. And what we wanted to do when we started was we work in cohort. We've been working in over 24 cities on other projects, and we want to make this platform free to all. So we wanted to standardize the process. But what we've learned is that customization is going to be the standard. Because the document that the county wants to use, they don't want to mirror the document at the city because of all the reasons that county and city government are different. And so the school district has signed and is at the table. The city, the county is getting ready to sign. And then our last kind of place that we're at with tension is the law enforcement agency. And so what happens, just to be really, really practical, what happens with a project like this is that you spend 2 years talking to all the lawyers and the mayor and giving people updates, and you do community engagement. There's one person in the law office that waits to the last minute when it's time to sign a document and ask 1,000 questions that takes you back to the beginning of the process. And then you start all over. And then you do it again. And then that lawyer has another lawyer that when it's right done, when the blue form is on someone's desk, we're getting on the plane, we're doing our Bloomberg get data happy dance, and then we get an email when we land in a phone call saying like, hey, you actually have to engage these people. And so we've done that, for about 2 years now, is this start, stop, go back and forth. Technology, data testing, that's gonna be easy, that's gonna be exciting. It's getting over these last legal hurdles for folks to see.
Lawyers in the room?
Right, exactly. And so you guys are my new best friends, but I invite Ayanna to come and for us to dive into some questions.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to having worked in city government, I can totally relate to trying to share data between different agencies, not always easy. And actually even, working at a private company, it's a challenge, so totally understand that. So Ayanna, you're a student at NYU?
Yes.
And what, surprised you the most about this project? Had you ever done anything like this before, or?
I have never done anything like this. It was really exciting, really grateful to Bloomberg Associates and to NY Media Lab for this opportunity. It's been amazing. One thing that really kind of impacted me was in setting up a data model, like conceptually thinking about like how a data model for something like this would work. and looking at all of the different entities involved, that was pretty amazing. Just looking at like all of these different government systems, how they like kind of have to interact out in the real world, but then putting it down on this this map that you look like everything is in front of you, and then figuring out how they all kind of work together and how you could kind of translate data across different entities was really interesting to me.
The scale of it.
Yep. So the problem-solving piece of it was definitely huge. Like that was definitely had to learn a lot about like different government agencies, and then how to look at different like data problems and solve them. And then also keeping in mind at the end of the day the users, like the community members, people that are going to be looking at this. You know, we have our stakeholders that are, you know, they have the control in a sense, like they're making major decisions, but then you also have the people that are really affected by these issues, and how do we create a platform that's also like for them to use? Yeah.
That goes back, I think, to what we were talking about too, with community and trust and just engaging those stakeholders. And, you know, you've been involved in this process for a while. You know, how has that process played out from your perspective? You know, you have the buy-in from the mayor, right? But there are all these people in the community who are impacted, so.
So I think the world has changed a lot in the past few years, and there's kind of like two schools of thought. There's one that's more alarmist, that says, you know, the more data we have, the higher the probability of things going wrong. And then there's another school of thought that says, only in the social impact area do we question data use. Like there's so little capacity in social services with data. And the thing is, we have to meet somewhere in the middle. We have to protect people, protect privacy, but then we also have to be willing to have the difficult conversations about, we actually don't know what good can come from it, because the social sector is so late to data integration. And so it's constantly keeping people, I think, at the table. I've been really surprised with how sophisticated community members are about being stewards of their own data and knowing what happens when data goes wrong. We can pull any example from, you know, in the past where a certain population has been disproportionately impacted negatively because of data access. And so how do we prevent that from happening in a project like this? And for us, it's been like, let's just keep having the conversation. Like, keep people at the table, keep people engaged, and then we'll come up with something that's good enough that allows us to answer questions, and then we'll go back to the table and make it even better.
Also, I know a lot of cities and nonprofits, right, struggle with, you know, they want to integrate data and use these technological platforms, but cost is an issue, right? So how does this project address that in the long term? Like, will they be able to continually maintain it? And
Yeah. So it's really, really important. You know, we've worked with groups like Bright Hive, the U Group, based out of DC. What we're building, we want it to be free for cities in any municipality that wants to go through the process to access it. With that being said, we're having conversations like, how do we control for maintenance costs? Because not within this project, but what's happening around this project is that the for-profit sector is now understanding what, like cities could be a new pathway of business. And so cities are paying hundreds of millions of dollars of things that should be free or could only be a couple $1 million because of what's happening with industry. And so what we've been trying to do is make sure that the only cost burden on a municipality is to the degree that they want to go beyond what we're designing for. And so we're designing for visualizations, six larger milestones with indicators under that. But if a city wants to say, hey, I want to add this plug on, and then that's a cost that you wanted to assume, but the base level cost needs to be minimally. I mean, right now, maintenance costs are under, I'm throwing a number in the head because I'm not the guy that does the numbers, but I know it's under $40,000 per year just for the infrastructure. And it can be even smaller depending upon, you know, because there's also a conversation about data standards. And so can we get certain systems to move to this standard so that each school district has a different way of collecting attendance? Hopefully down the line we get to a point where there's standards, and so the cost burden is lesser because of a national standard or guideline around data collection.
Makes sense. Ayanna, just curious, you know, has this project given you any insights into what you want to do after you complete your Ph.D., or do you think you would continue to work in data for cities, or what are your thoughts?
I don't know, that time feels so far away right now, but I definitely want
to say, Ayanna worked on this project while studying for a test that I think
qualifying exams.
Yeah, so she's put a lot of work into this, so I just want to thank you for, you know, being able to do it all.
Thank you. It's definitely impacted me in like wanting to continue to explore data science.
Great.
This is great for exploring that.
That's why we're here, right? Data for good. So
Exactly.
thank you so much. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.